introduce Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan. Mr. Prime Minister, today marks your return to Davos since joining for the first time in 2014. And since that time, and during your 6 years in office, Japan, the third largest economy in the world, under your leadership, has made impressive progress on many fronts, demonstrating that even an aging society can reinvigorate and revitalize strong patterns of dynamism and inspire a new era of hope economy. In June of this year, Japan will chair for the first time the G20 Summit in Osaka. This will mark the largest summit gathering that your country has ever hosted and highlight Japan's commitment to assuming a more open, inclusive, sustainable, and human-centered future society, Society 5.0, as you call it. Prime Minister, it has been a tradition that the chairs of the G20 always join at the beginning of their mandate to present and share with us some ideas about the agenda of the G20. Mr. Prime Minister, I want to use this opportunity also to thank you because in the course of the last year, we opened the World Economic Forum's Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in Japan in cooperation and as a joint venture with your government. I'm sure also that you will share with us your leadership in using new technologies to advance the competitiveness and the well-being of your society. Mr. Prime Minister, we are all keen to hear your perspectives and vision to the future. Please welcome the Prime Minister of Japan.
Thank you so much, Professor Schwab. And yes, it's been 5 years since I was here last time. I'm very much glad to be back. On the 26th of December 2012, I came back in office as Prime Minister. At that time, in my country, we saw a tall wall on which many saw the writing, thinking that Japan was doomed. Japan was losing population. The population was aging. Japan could not grow, or so the argument went. It was a wall of despair, a wall of Japan pessimism. Since that time, our working age population has dropped by 4.5 million people. We have responded by pushing hard for womenomics, encouraging more and then still more women to work while lessening the burden women shoulder. As a result, we now have 2 million more, repeat, 2 million more women employed. The rate of female labor participation has hit 67%, an all-time high for Japan, and higher than, say, in the US. Meanwhile, the number of people over 65 still actively working has also increased by 2 million, thanks to our policies that enable them to keep working. After each job seeker, you see more than one employer chasing, and that's the same throughout the country, a picture never seen before. Out of every 100 college graduates looking to work, 98 find employment, also a record number. Corporate Japan has responded by raising wages by 2% year on year, the highest rise since the beginning of the century for 5 consecutive years. As a result, during my 6 years in office, Japanese GDP has grown by 10.9%, adding $490 billion US dollars. A long-awaited positive feedback cycle is taking root, with growth in employment and income, generating greater demand and even more employment. In order to make our growth long-lasting, we are encouraging investment, which will enhance productivity. Recently, we made a new law under which, for the next 5 years, as many as 340,000 skilled workers will be invited to Japan from abroad. How about the gap between the rich and the less affluent? During my administration, the child relative poverty rate, which had never before gone down, did go down for the first time, and did so significantly. Before my administration started, only 24% high school seniors from single-parent homes went to college. Recent figures show that number has risen to 42. It will go up further as we are going to expand our free education program from October this year onward. We are not widening the gap. We are narrowing it. Despair was wiped out by renewed hope. Hope, ladies and gentlemen, is the most important factor for growth. A country aging can still grow as a hope-driven economy. May I now solemnly declare defeatism about Japan is now defeated. Now, later this year in June, in Osaka, Japan, we will be hosting this year's G20 Summit. Let us make it a chance to regain optimism for the future, providing reassurance that it is possible to achieve a hope-driven economy. As always, at that summit, we are going to discuss a range of issues. But today, I will focus on two big issues, only two. First off, I would like Osaka G20 to be long remembered as the summit that started worldwide data governance. Let Osaka G20 set in train a new track for looking at data governance. Call it the Osaka track. Under the roof of the WTO, the time to do so is ripe. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know that for decades to come, it will be digital data driving our economy forward. We had better act now because coming into being every single day is more than 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, which is, according to one estimate, as much as 250,000 times the printed material in the US Library of Congress. A delay of 1 year means we'll be light years behind. We must, on one hand, be able to put our personal data and data embodying intellectual property, national security, intelligence, and so on, under careful protection, while, on the other hand, we must enable the free flow of medical, industrial, traffic, and other most useful, non-personal, anonymous data to see no borders. Repeat, no borders. The regime we must build is one of 4 DFFT, data free flow with trust. Non-personal data. Needless to say, it is not the big capital-intensive industries, but rather individuals who will benefit from both the fourth industrial revolution and what we call Society 5.0, which this fourth industrial revolution will bring about. In Society 5.0, it is no longer capital, but data that connects and drives everything, helping to fill the gap between the rich and the less privileged. Services of medicine and education from elementary to tertiary will reach small villages in the sub-Saharan region. Girls who have given up going to school will see beyond their own village a wider horizon where the sky is the limit. Our task is obvious. We must make data a great gap buster through AI, IoT, and robotics. The data-driven Society 5.0 will bring about a new reality for urbanity. Our cities will be made much more livable for all sorts of people from all walks of life. To that end, the promise I made 5 years ago still holds today, that I will continue to work as a drill bit, drilling right through outdated relations to change them. The engine for growth, if you think about it, is fueled no longer by gasoline, but more and more by digital data. When we say we need to change the WTO, we are still thinking about goods, agricultural or otherwise, for which distances and borders matter. We have yet to catch up with a new reality in which data drives everything, where the DFFT, the data free flow with trust, should top the agenda in our new economy. In a sense, it's all déjà vu. When John D. Rockefeller was building Standard Oil, no one knew what to do with gasoline dumped into the nearby Cuyahoga River. Gasoline caused fires many times. It took 3 to 4 decades before we humans came to know the value of gasoline. About 20 years into the 20th century, gasoline was running cars and flying airplanes. It is the same, isn't it, about data? Around 1995, we started to use the internet on a massive scale. But it was almost 20 years into the 21st century that we found data driving our economy. Why not start the Osaka truck and make it a very fast truck? It will be great if every one of us from the US, Europe, Japan, China, and India, to live 14 countries in Africa, share our efforts and our successes in breathing fresh life into the WTO. In Osaka, here comes my second point. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd very much like to highlight what innovation does and how much innovation counts in tackling climate change. Because, and this is an important because, we need disruptions to remind us of that. The IPCC, in its recent 1.5-degree report, tells us that global net human-caused emissions of CO2 should reach net zero around 2050, meaning that any remaining emissions would need to be balanced out by removing CO2 from the air. We must invite more, still more disruptive innovations before it's too late. CO2, ladies and gentlemen, could well be the best and most affordable resource for multiple uses. There is artificial photosynthesis, for which a key discovery, one photocatalysis, we made by Akira Fujishima, a Japanese scientist. An old technology of methylation is getting attention anew, to remove CO2. It's time now to think about CCU, carbon capture and utilization. Hydrogen, as both a primary source and, more importantly, a carrier of energy, must become cheaper and more easily affordable. My government is aiming to reduce the production cost of hydrogen by at least 90% by the year 2050 to make it cheaper than natural gas. We will be inviting to Japan topmost experts in science and technology from G20 member countries to combine forces in accelerating innovations. I'm also pleased to tell you that my government, first among others, published a guidance paper in December last year, along with the TCFD, or Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. ESG investment worldwide has grown over the last 5 years by more than $9 trillion US. That's a big amount, but we must channel even more into green innovation. And the guideline we put together will help motivate more companies to spend greater amounts on disruptive innovations. I must say that spending money for a green earth and blue ocean, once deemed costly, is now growth generator. Decarbonation and profit making can happen in tandem. We policymakers must be held responsible to make it happen, as I'll be stressing in Osaka this year. At the deepest spot on the Pacific Ocean, we now find something terrible going on. The bodies of small sea fleas down at the bottom of the ocean hold toxic PCB contaminants in very high density. Some say that the microplastics are the cause. Again, in Osaka, I would like to build a shared sense that it takes a worldwide commitment, not to increase, but to reduce plastics flowing into the seas. There is absolutely no need to restrain our economic activities. Innovation, again, is what counts. Let us jumpstart from Osaka toward worldwide action to that end. My third and last point is about Japan's commitment. Japan is determined to preserve and committed to enhancing the free, open, and rules-based international order. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so very much pleased and proud to tell you that on December 30th, 2018, we finally brought TPP-11 into effect. Now, I must say, I'm just as pleased and just as proud to make another announcement. Effective the 1st of February, which is just around the corner, the EU-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement will enter into force. The entire world should benefit from the economies and efficiencies these two mega deals will bring about. I call on all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to rebuild trust toward the system for international trade. That should be a system that is fair, transparent, and effective in protecting IPR, and also in such areas as e-commerce and government procurement. TPP 11 and the EU-Japan EPA both aim at achieving those goals. Let us begin here. The US, Europe, and Japan must join forces to facilitate changes within the WTO, especially its rules for government subsidies. The Osaka track, needless to say, will make the WTO more relevant in the age of the data-driven economy. I said at the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, that hope matters more than anything when it comes to generating growth. Hope is about looking forward to tomorrow, next year, the year after next, and 10 or 20 years down the road. Fortune has embraced my country. Events we are hosting over the next decade, beginning with this year's G20 and Rugby World Cup, and extended to Tokyo 2020 for the Olympics and Paralympics, and to World Expo 2025, Osaka, Kansai. Most importantly, this year, for the first time in as long as 200 years, His Majesty, the Emperor of Japan, will abdicate and a new emperor will take the throne. It is the dawn of a new era. Japan, now reinvigorated and revitalized with your embrace, will continue to be one of the foremost open, democratic, and law-abiding contributors to peace and growth in the world. Thank you so much.
Prime Minister, thank you for sharing with us your ideas about Japan and the world. And I have to say I'm very happy for two things. First, that age you consider to be no obstacle for innovation and creative ideas. That's a personal remark. Second, it's very refreshing to see here a politician who has really a far-sighted, very technology-saving view, because global technology governance will be one of the key issues for world cooperation and world harmony. Now, you talked about those different issues, particularly creating an international framework for the cross-border treatment of data flows. This is not only an issue of governments, it's an issue also of business and civil society. How do you intend to integrate the other stakeholders of global society into your efforts?
As I mentioned in my presentation, in the whole world, the fourth industrial revolution is going on. It is very big change occurring. At the same time, on economies crossing borders, very rapid globalization is making progress. However, there is nevertheless a big challenge. That is to say that we might feel that we are left behind. There are people who are feeling like that. My jobs are taken away. I will have no income in the future. These are the people having a fear, having discontent and anxiety. There are a lot of people in the world as such. As I said, in our country, Japan decided and launched TPP-11 and the new Japan-EU EPA. So within the global context of economy, there are people working in agriculture, there are people working in SMEs. The current world is posing a great opportunity. We are undergoing a major reform. So, people will not be left behind. We would like to communicate this message very clearly to these people. That's very important. AI, IoT, robotics, they are making enormous development. So education is very important in these areas. In other words, there should not be an educational discrepancy. We should not have the gap growing because of the difference in education. So we should be squarely faced with such challenges, and we'd like to incorporate such changes into our growth strategy so that more peace and stable world should be created. That is the direction that I would like to operate and manage my policy. So what we are doing now in terms of policy is that in classrooms, AI education will be provided, or IoT education would be solidly given to children. It is not only for the children. Even there are many middle-aged and elderly people who would like to relearn technology and techniques. Thank you.
You can provide a role model in this case for the world. Prime Minister, I would like to come back to one worry which was often expressed during this meeting. It is the ongoing trade frictions between the USA and China. And we see increased volatility. It has also led to an appreciation of the Japanese yen. What is your opinion about it, and how does it affect your country, and what could we do about this situation?
Japan will have the presidency of the G20 this year. The world economy is gradually and moderately improving. I think without a doubt that this is taking place. Worldwide, however, there are risks, what you pointed out. For example, U.S.-China trade friction is one of those risks. And Japan traditionally has said that the tit-for-tat trade restrictive measures is of no benefit. Trade measures within the WTO should be dealt with in a WTO consistent manner. In my speech, I also mentioned that major changes are taking place, and the WTO is behind the curve. It's not keeping up with the pace. And within this context, we have to make WTO into a more credible existence. We need to reform it so that it becomes more credible. And that is necessary at the G20. With regard to rulemaking, Japan would like to play a leading role. Of course, there are other risks other than the trade friction, Brexit and deceleration of China. And with regard to Brexit, we need to make sure that there is a transitional period. We hope that a transitional period is established so that there are many companies making inroads into the UK. We hope that the impact on the economy would be reduced to the greatest extent possible. On the Japanese economy, the fundamentals are very solid and robust. After the war, in the days of economic recovery, The longest, I believe, this is among the longest periods of economic recovery. The previous longest period of recovery after the war, compared with this period, however, there are two major differences. Previously, in the previous economic recovery, during the 6 years, the economy only grew at 2.5%. And this time, as mentioned earlier, 10.9% is the growth, which is about 4 times. Employment is 3.5 million, which was generated. And there were disparities among regions in the past. But this time, all regions are seeing their economy improve. Openings to job applications ratio is over 1.0 for all. And we want to make this momentum an even more robust one. And this year, we have the EPA and the TPP 11. We should like to use all of this as the growth engine.
You just mentioned it was one of the longest economic positive cycles. And you also mentioned there are quite some threats which we are exposed to. One of the fears which has been expressed even by international organizations, if the economy would run into major difficulties on a global level, the fear is that we are not sufficiently equipped. Contrary to 2009, where we had strong global cooperation, decisive actions of central banks, today we have even a bigger debt load. So are we equipped for such a situation?
At this year's G20 in Osaka, there is one big theme. That is, 10 years have passed since the Lehman crisis, Lehman collapse, and the world economy is now faced with a new structural challenge. There is aging, there is a growing income gap, and they may be the major drag for further economic growth. The fourth industrial revolution goes on, and there is a governance gap, which, if it is properly dealt with, it can be the key for the solution. Global environmental problems are heightening risks brought by such a situation. Now, international community, the countries belonging to G20 together, we must be squarely facing with these challenges and overcome these difficulties. I think we are able to do that. For example, in Japan, education for free, as well as the social security reform involving the entirety of the society, is being progressed. So the gap and other social issues would be addressed, and SDGs would be contributed by us by going through the redistribution of income. Data distribution, the WTO reform in new era for the promotion of free trade. These activities are likely important. Climate change, marine plastic problem. So the private sector innovative technologies must be resorted in bringing about solution to these new problems. At G20 in Osaka this year, so the whole world will express that they will cooperate together so that they will face up with those challenges, and we should be communicating this message to the rest of the world.
Minister Abe, I would like to come back to an issue. We were very impressed by the figures you presented related to the Japanese economy. Now, I remember when you increased the consumption tax, which corresponds to the VAT, from 5 to 8% 5 years ago, it gave it had a negative impact on your economic growth. And it's well known that you're planning to increase from 8% to 10%. Are you afraid that this will be again hampering the economic growth of Japan?
Presently, as I mentioned earlier, the Japanese economy is such that the period of recovery has exceeded 6 years, and this month will mark the time that the recovery period is the longest after the war, and I believe such potential exists. And the post-war longest recovery period in the past was such that the GDP grew only 2.5%, but this time 10.9% is the growth which I have just mentioned earlier. And so this time, the consumption tax hike, by raising the consumption tax, the social security burdens we will try to address because the social security has to be catered to. And up until now, we believe the environment is such that we are able to raise the consumption tax. Toward October, we want to make the conditions even more robust to prepare for this. When we raised the consumption tax previous time, there were some reflections, and based on these reflections, we want to make up and do more and return what we have achieved through the consumption tax hike. We want to overcome all the impediments that this may bring about.
Prime Minister, one last question. You just were in Moscow. Would you like to share with us one thought about your visit in Moscow?
I visited Moscow. I met with the President Putin in summit meeting. As you know, between Japan and Russia, we still have not concluded peace treaty. That is the situation. It is an abnormal situation. I would like to put an end to this anomaly. To that end, we must resolve the territorial issue and we must conclude the peace treaty. Last year in Singapore, I had a meeting. On that occasion, with him, both countries would launch concretely the negotiation for a peace treaty. That was what we agreed in Singapore. So following this agreement, this time round, we spent a good amount of time so that we had an in-depth discussion. That's how I saw it. However, regarding the substance, we are in the midst of negotiations, so I cannot divulge many points. But if a peace treaty is concluded between the two countries, it will no doubt contribute to the peace and prosperity of not only two countries, but to the Far East Asia.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us in Davos. I think your speech showed Japan is back. And I also want to congratulate you. For sharing with us the G20 agenda, which is a very forward-looking agenda. And I can promise to you those issues which form part of the agenda, like data flows, plastics in the ocean, are very much also at the core of the work of the World Economic Forum. And if next year we can serve as an amplifier of the results of Osaka, we would be very proud to do so. So thank you again for being here and sharing really the insights of your future plans. Thank you.